One of the things that we typically hear in South Africa is that we are a country of a declining number of farmers. And of course, many people say this and they get worried when they hear about it because the agricultural sector in South Africa does more than just providing food. It provides jobs to rural communities, and it ensures that our rural towns and the rural municipalities are vibrant. Because when you look at the business activity in some of the regions in South Africa, you realize that agriculture and tourism are some of the sectors that sustain these economies. So when you hear that the commercial farmers are declining, it ought to worry you. But I think if we look at the figures closely here, you realize that things aren't necessarily the way we tend to interpret them about what's going on in South African agriculture. And firstly, for people who don't look at this sector closely every time, you have to appreciate the fact that we are fairly a big country and agriculture takes a great part of our country. We're a country of about 122 million hectares. That's the size of South Africa. And of course, not all of that is largely farming. There are mountains, housing, towns, and all of the activities that we see in our country. But agriculture today, give or less, it takes up about 76 million hectares. That's roughly the area that we farm of South Africa. And not all of that actually is on crop farming, because crop farming or land that is arable for crop farming in this country is about 15% of the overall agricultural land that is there. But the land has declined over time, the one that we farm. Back in the early 90s, we were farming an area of just over 80 million hectares. Today, we're at around 76 million hectares. And where did the other hectares go then? Those hectares were switched either to industrial use, to housing, and the other activities. But the good thing in all of these changes or decline in the area that we plant is that our agricultural output hasn't gone down. If anything, from 1994, it has more than doubled in value and in volume terms. Productivity levels have improved. And we've detailed in a number of segments here on AgriView on what is juicing up or boosting that agricultural productivity. Now, coming to the issue of the commercial farmers, are they really 40,000 commercial farmers? And where is that figure coming from? And the other figure that we have also heard is that there are about 2.5 million smallholder farmers in South Africa. And the large part, of course, of the output is coming from a commercial farmer. And I think we have to get our definitions clear here before we delve into this so that at least we know that we are having a common conversation. And some of the definitions that I have here is that for one to be considered a commercial farmer, you must be an individual or entity or a household that is involved in agricultural production for the intention of at least selling some of your products to the market, and you buy some inputs to ensure that you can produce. Those are what roughly I would consider a commercial farmer in South Africa. And of course, there is a large-scale farmer. And a large-scale farmer or large-scale enterprise is any farmer that has an annual turnover of over 22 million rands. That you could consider a large-scale farmer in South Africa. It doesn't mean that that is the only commercial farmer, but it's a large scale. If you're medium scale, if you have a turnover of anywhere between 13 million rands and 22 million rands, we'll consider that a medium-sized family farm in South Africa. That's what the numbers are coming from. And no, don't worry, I'm not making this stuff up. It's coming from Stats SA. So you'll be like, hey, this guy's Strobo. He sits down and makes up definitions. And he wants us, all of us to comply to what he says. No. I'm not in a business of defining what things should be. This is what Stats SA tells us. And if you look at the micro farmer then, Stats SA tells us that any farmer that has a turnover of less than 13 million rand, that is a small-scale farmer. So if you go around and saying, I'm representing small-scale and the family farms, those are also small-scale and family farms, and some are in the categories that I've just explained now when you are thinking about the turnover aspect of what's going on here. These definitions are important because this is a structure of the South African farming economy. And the other important aspect is a subsistence or a household farmer, subsistence farmers. And subsistence farmers is anyone just produce for own consumption. If you come from where I come from, in the Eastern Cape, we have a number of those. You travel around our villages, you will see most of those people are subsistence farmers. Even your neighbors, if you're sitting in towns of Flagstaff, Bizana, Queenstown, those are largely subsistence farmers. But of course, they can change and progress and be commercial farmers, which is one of the points, by the way, that I've been saying. And I know that the leadership in the Eastern Cape sometimes watches this show. And I've been telling them that, hey, folks, Magwa as well as Majola tea must be converted to something that could be producing more value and more jobs for our province. And I'm still saying that, and I'm saying it in this show so that the Premier there, Premier Mabuyan, knows that these are conversations we must have. And a household can be roughly 3 or 4 people. Those are the definitions when we are thinking about the structure of the South African farming sector. But then back to 40,000, where is that figure coming from? The figure comes from the 2017 Statistics South Africa Census Survey. What the Census Survey told us was that if you look at the number of farmers that are actually VAT-paying in South Africa, the number of farmers that pay VAT are around 40,000 farming units or farming enterprises. And that doesn't mean then that's the end of the commercial farmer, because people look at that number and they look back in 1990 where we had 100,000 or just under that, and in the 80s where the farmers that were paying VAT were much more higher than that, and they say now there is a decline in the commercial farming sector. And for you to pay the VAT though, you must have a turnover of at least around R1 million. And I think then that's the definition of this. If you have a turnover of about R1 million, you are within the 40,000 large scale of farmers that people call the commercial farmers. But that's not the end of the commercial farmers in South Africa. Because if you look or remember the definitions that are said, that a commercial farmer is anyone that sells the produce to the market, but also buys the inputs. It means that there may be a number of some of the households that are actually producing a lot, but they are not at the level where they have a turnover of R1 million. You can almost think of it, if you were part of the students of recent years of a missing middle on A Fees Must Fall, they are pretty much in that missing middle where they are not yet as subsistence, but at the same time, they are not at a large scale. They are in that part that is in the middle. And those are the people that in South Africa, when we are thinking about increasing the commercial farmers, the number of commercial farmers, we should be looking at that category and saying, how do we support these farming enterprises? How do we select from them to benefit from the 2.5 million hectares of land from the government so that they can be able one day to be amongst those VAT-paying farmers in South Africa that you categorize in that part of the commercial farming. But they are still, even now, the commercial farmers. And if you're asking me then to say, okay, if you buy the story that I'm telling you now, that this is not all commercial, go with the definitions that I said, then you could ask a question and say, okay, fine then, where are we in that number? Where we are at that number, if you read the report that Stats SA released, for example, in their population census earlier this year, in that report, one of the key things that emerges is that the households that are producing in agriculture for sale, they are actually around about 106,000. That's 106. So we have just over 100,000 households that are producing for sale. And the others that are producing also for sale that you could consider commercial, but part of that is for consumption and part of that is for sale, it's around 177 households. So looking at these people that are paying the VAT and looking at the number of households that are also there, you come up, give or take, with 280,000 households in South Africa that are commercial farming, that are producing and producing for sale. But the ones that are paying the VAT is the 40,000. You do want to see the VAT-paying number of farmers increasing from 40,000 to somewhere at 50 to 60 to approaching the numbers that we had back in the day. The key thing then is, how do you tap in those other farmers that are already there? They are producing and producing for sale and also for themselves, which is the 100,000, and some that are not yet at the level that are paying the VAT, and which gives us the 280,000 number that I'm talking about. And I think when you are considering the number of commercial farmers in South Africa, that's the figure that we actually should be talking about. And if you are keen on where this comes from, there is a report that Statistics South Africa released on the 31st of July 2025. You go to their website and you look at that report on table 3.9. It has all of this data, and you'll be able to pretty much see what the hell am I talking about here and where these farmers are talking about. And it's important that I raise this, not for the sense of saying we are denying what's going on with the consolidation and all of these things. But I don't want people to think about agriculture as a sunset industry, because it is not a sunset sector. It is a sector that is a sunrise sector that still could grow by plus 30%. It could still bring 1 million jobs in primary as in the value chain, as Chapter 6 of the National Development Plan outlined. But in doing that, we will, of course, appreciate any new people that are joining the sector. But I think there's a lot of people that are already participating in the sector that you can pretty much tap in when you are thinking about land reform or any other aspect of saying, how do you commercialize further those people? And there's also young people that are in this sector. And if you want to see the example of that, we have what we call I'm a Farmer, which is part and parcel of the household of these podcasts. And if you look there, you will see a number of the people that have been profiled. You check on your link, I'm a Farmer podcast, and it will actually lead you to that. And you'll be able to see many young South Africans that are engaged on practical work in South Africa, where we should be thinking now about how do we assist those people to reaching the large-scale part. And for the government, when they are paying the VAT, we are also getting the gains of what we need for our fiscal side. So this is really a win-win and a growing aspect of South Africa. And I thought it's important that we take some of those aspects and put them on the table. Now, the two things I want to close off in this week's segment on is that the fact is that we have about 284,000 commercial farmers in South Africa, not 40,000. That's the fact that I think we must put on the side. And of course, one can think of these things on a racial dynamic side. I also don't think it's correct to say all commercial farmers in South Africa are white farmers, because that's not true. In fact, the largely white commercial farmers in South Africa make up 21% of that 284,000 farmers. I'm not talking about the incomes. On the incomes aspect, of course, these numbers differ because the people who have a turnover of over 22 million rands, it's pretty much about 2,600 people, and they make up about 67% of all of that VAT-paying group. So in the numbers terms, yes on that. But if I'm talking about the actual households, the actual individuals and enterprises that are there, it's about 284. And the majority of them are Blacks, Indian, colored. And then it's about how do we then assist them in commercializing and getting to scale. So this sunrise sector and benefiting from the partnerships of the private sector, it carries much more greater capacity on restoring and reshaping and growing the agricultural sector in South Africa, because we are sitting in a most exciting sector that can grow the rural economies and bring the much needed jobs. And I thought discussing the structure of the farming economy is an important aspect. And we've written about this, and we'll make sure that you can find online the text that we have written to dive deeper in some of these numbers. And we are always grateful to the people that assist us in these podcasts with the support. I'm talking here about the folks at Santam and many others that will come in, like the Nedbank and any other collaborators that we will find along the way. And thank you so very much for watching this week's segment. And we'll be back with the next one. Spread the word. We do want to correct the misconception and the myth about the farming sector.